What's up, everybody? My name is Dana Harris with Young Gurus Math Tutoring, and I'm back again to drop some more math jewels. In this video, I'm going to be talking about imaginary numbers. Yes, I said imaginary numbers. I have not gone crazy, but there is a type of number called an imaginary number. Now, in order for you to learn about imaginary numbers, you need to know two things. I is equal to the square root of -1, and I squared is equal to -1. Okay? I meaning imaginary. So I is equal to the square root of -1, and I squared is equal to -1. Let's get into the examples. If I have the square root of -16. Now, many of you have been told that you cannot have the square root of a negative number. But just like in a lot of things with mathematics, they told us one thing at one point, and then later on, years later, they said, oh, well, never mind that. This is an exception to the rule. So in order to keep from getting you confused, I want you to understand that I have the square root of -16, and the rules of square roots tell me that this is actually equal to the same thing as the square root of -1 times the square root of 16. Okay, so we said that I is equal to the square root of -1. So this is actually I and then the square root of 16. Well, square root of 16 is actually 4, right? So then this gives me 4I. Okay, so if I have the square root of -16, since 16 is a perfect square number, I can actually turn that into this 4I based upon my rules of radicals. Okay, hopefully by now you're realizing that I wasn't just joking when I said imaginary numbers. It is a real, well, it's not real. It does exist. For my math people, you guys know why I just kind of laughed at that one. So let's say if I have the square root of -8, okay? Well, based upon my rules of radicals, I can take this and say that this is equal to the square root of -1 times the square root of 8, okay? Well, this equals I, and then I can break this down a little more. This actually equals the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, okay? So we have square root of -1 is equal to I. Square root of 4 is equal to 2. So I have I times 2, and then square root of 2 is not a perfect square number, so times the square root of 2. So I get 2I times the square root of 2. All right. Let's look at another one. And imaginary numbers, like I say, they connect to something a little further down the line, but this video is to help those of you get an understanding of what imaginary numbers are. If I have example tree and I have the square root of -5. Now, once again, this is the square root of -1 times the square root of 5. Square root of -1 we said is I, but the square root of 5 is not a perfect square number, so we can simply leave it as I times the square root of 5. Now, most of the time, people like to put the i's in front of the radical so that it's not confusing as to whether the I is under the radical symbol. So I would suggest putting your i's in front of it. And that's all you have for this one. One more example of imaginary numbers. So now you all know that there are real numbers and there are imaginary numbers. Example 4, let's say if I have the square root of -75. I want to use that same rule. I want to break it down to the square root of -1 times the square root of 75. Well, square root of 75 can be broken down to the square root of 25 times the square root of 5. Okay, so I have three terms, but now square root of -1 is equal to I. So I have I. Square root of 25 is 5. And then square root of 5 is just the square root of 5. Okay, so I want to put these together, and I want to say 5i, remember, have to put the number first, coefficient, times the square root of 5. Okay, and so here's just a simple video on imaginary numbers. Now, there are larger imaginary numbers that we can break down. For example, we can take higher powers of I and break them down simpler, but that's another video for another time. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Do me that great big favor. Share it with a friend as well. Thank you so much. Go to Instagram and follow me at YG Math Tutoring. Go to Facebook, like the Facebook page, Young Gurus Math Tutoring. And I'm so grateful for everyone that's been watching my content. Please make a comment, ask a question, send me a DM on Instagram, or send me a message on Facebook. But please remember, I've got the solution to your math problems.